Great. Okay. There we go. So welcome everyone. My name is Kathy Markov here in beautiful Santa Barbara. Of course, this is a virtual background. We'll talk about that in this class. We're going to talk about virtual interviews and how you prepare for them. So this is important. Let me talk to you about the learning objectives for this class. So this is what we're hoping to get out of this. And I want to make sure you can see my screen. I just want to make sure we're on screen too. Perfect. Okay, so this is what I hope you get out of this. That you realize that virtual interviews are the new norm. So it's very important that you begin to feel comfortable with technology to secure a job. Because even after the pandemic is over, employers have realized the cost-saving benefits in terms of travel and time by using the virtual platforms for interviews. So it might be possible to have live interviews, but my guess and what most of the experts in the area say is that we're going to see virtual interviews in the beginning as a screening tool, and then the live interviews only for the candidates are very serious about. So it's very important that all of us feel comfortable with this process of virtual interviews. That you learn how to make a good virtual impression, and that you're prepared for the different types of interview questions and learning strategies to answer them. So this is what we're going to be looking at. So we've got a couple more people to let in the room. Let's talk about virtual interviews being the new normal. So even though, again, during the coronavirus pandemic, those employers that were in the enviable position of being able to hire, well, they were using the virtual platform. But as I said, virtual interviews are really here to stay. And so it's very important that we begin to feel comfortable with this. These are some of the benefits of virtual interviews that employers have been realizing. One, they require less preparation time for you and the interviewer. If the technology works, then everyone usually feels more comfortable because you're in your comfortable environment. It's easy to really focus in on each other. If it's done well, there can be fewer interruptions. It's easier to schedule as it eliminates commute time for everybody. And you can apply for jobs all over the world, and employers can interview job seekers from all over the world. Now, I know that not everybody has a job that could be done all over the world, but the potential is there. And so it opens up for employers and job seekers opportunities that might not have existed before. The most important part is that you feel comfortable with the technology. So you need to practice with the technology before you are actually using it. Don't fear it. We can feel fear with it when we are uncomfortable with it, when we feel that we don't know what to expect. We've never been on it before. So this is why you really need to practice. Get clarity from whoever's organizing the interview on what platform it's going to be using, what are the expectations they have. Some of the same questions you would ask if you were having a live interview. How many people will be on it? They could also do group interviews in the virtual platform. But you want to make sure that if they're using Zoom, like we are today, that you have the Zoom application in its latest format, that you're comfortable logging on, that your name is presented in a professional way, all of those kind of things. So the key here is that you really need to prepare. because if you don't prepare, then you're going to fail. So let's also remember, you've got to prepare mentally for the interview. It's very much the same as preparing for an in-person interview. It's just adding another layer onto it, that layer of technology. So let's look at some of the best practices. So the first thing, as I mentioned before, be sure you know what platform it's on. Zoom is one that's used very commonly, but some people might use Adobe Connect. There are also job-seeking platforms that have their own proprietary video conferencing available, or large organizations might have their own video conferencing software that is not something that's common in the rest of the world, but they're going to want to find a way to help you feel comfortable. Make sure you read everything that they send you. Make sure you have the correct connection information. I know I set up a lot of Zoom meetings, and I can tell when someone has logged on. It says someone's logged on. I'm not there. They can't actually get into the meeting, but it shows me that they're prepared. They've practiced. So make sure you have the correct information and plan to log on at the scheduled time. In fact, you cannot be late. You shouldn't be late for a regular interview, but you've got far fewer excuses, in the sense that you can't say, oh, there was traffic, because we know you're doing this somewhere comfortable. Best practice is that you log on about 5 minutes early, and then you're there, you're ready. You may be in a waiting room like you were for this meeting, this training, but you're there. You want to be sure that you make a good first impression. So of course I picked this picture because it's pretty funny, right? We all know that we may not be wearing our best dress pants or a skirt underneath. What we have is very professional. In fact, today I'm wearing what I think is, business casual. I have a pair of jeans and tennis shoes on. I wouldn't go to an interview necessarily dressed like this, but from the waist up, I'm looking pretty professional. This is important. This concept of professionalism is relative to the industry with which you are working in. So if I was applying for an executive position, I probably would wear a suit, just like you would for a live interview. This guy probably looks good from the waist up for something like that. But if he's applying for a job in maybe manufacturing or in the agriculture industry, that may not be the best waist up look for him. So you want to consider, just like you would for a live interview, how can I make a good first impression? So here are some more tips. Consider the background. And I will say, yes, they're looking. So if we look at these pictures, so this one woman, yeah, she's got a bookshelf, but it's pretty messy. This other woman is obviously laying down. And that guy might really love these geckos or chameleon, whatever it is, but unless he's going for a job at a zoo, even so, that's not the greatest picture. You want to consider that. Now, the virtual backgrounds have really improved as of late. And even with Zoom, at the beginning of the pandemic, you really needed to have a green screen in order to see your background. But nowadays, you don't need that anymore. And you can get a number of very professional looking backgrounds. And it's something important to consider. You want to think about how you come across. So, of course, this is a woman. Women do need to think about makeup. You need to think about what will make you look presentable. What does your hair look like? What are you wearing? All of those things. Men, too, should think about some of this stuff. You want to think about lighting. This is why you want to practice. You want to get on there and make sure all of those things are sort of in place prior to you showing up at the interview. You don't want to be going after a job and just the process of logging in and being able to turn your camera on and for them to be able to hear you, all of that. If that is very cumbersome, particularly this day and age when employers are really expecting people, like this is baseline ability to interact virtually, it's very, very important that you make that as smooth as you can and that they can see you and that you look good. Let's talk about a couple of Zoom bloopers. So these things happen. In fact, I had a friend who had a blooper happen. Her mother walked into the room while she was giving a talk. It was very embarrassing, and she begged her workmates not to make it go viral, but these things do go viral. So here we have this guy, and he says, my boss turned herself into a potato on our Microsoft team meeting and can't figure out how to turn the setting off. So she was just stuck like this the entire meeting. So then let's see what the woman said. So then the boss said, I am potato boss. You should see me in a crown, right? I am glad this is making folks laugh at this time. Please stay planted at home and safe. And more needed laughs. Follow my favorite comedian, blah, 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 potato out. So, she was able to turn this into a humorous moment, but this is not something that you want to have happen on a virtual interview. Absolutely 100% not. So, many of you may be using this kind of platform quite a bit. I'll tell you, I teach classes at Cuesta Community College. I use this platform, and there are times when I ask students to actually change their name so that it's easy for me to put them into different groups. So I taught a class this weekend on time management, and I asked people to put themselves in groups according to some of the challenges they have managing time, like being a procrastinator, being a hoarder and clutter, being disorganized. So I asked them to change their name, so it was easy for me to put them into groups. And then I did ask them to change their name back. And some of them did and some of them didn't. And the reason why I did that is whatever name you used the last time you were on Zoom, for example, is going to show up the next time you get on. So you don't want to get on an interview and instead of your name, it says disorganized. I mean, that is really, you don't want to have that happen. So we want to be careful about that. Likewise, you don't want to use any kind of apps that might change your appearance, like turn you into potato, because then you might not be able to change it back. So just be a little cautious about that. Here's another blooper. Now this one is a little video, and I'm hopeful you'll be able to see and hear this, but it doesn't matter. It's very visual. So here's another blooper that you don't want to have happen. Okay. Oops. There we go. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not showing up right. Let's make sure I can get this to come through. Okay, let's hope that this will work. Okay. So what she was saying was not important, but the fact that her husband or boyfriend came into the room in his underwear and then bumped into a wall trying to get out of there was very embarrassing for everybody. So you want to ensure that that is not the kind of thing that's happening for you. So let's see for a minute. So I know you've seen the one of the woman who goes to the bathroom while she's on a meeting at work. You know, actually, she's taken that off the internet. Good for her. But you don't want to become the butt of those kind of jokes. That's embarrassing. So make sure that when you are preparing and thinking about where you're going to be, what you're going to wear, how you're going to look, that you ensure that you're in a space that can maintain privacy and quiet. That is really, truly important. So you also want to do your research on the organization. You know, this day and age, there's absolutely no excuse for this. Yes, go to the company website, but do a general search for news and other information. Follow the company on social media. Maybe they have a Facebook page or LinkedIn. Follow them. They may be looking to see what candidates are very interested in the company. Study the job announcement. Now, this day and age, there's no excuses because you've got that information right in the palm of your hand. So you need to do your research. You want to look the company up on the website, as I said, general searches. Also, what kind of news is out there? What's going on with the company? This gives you a good opportunity to develop some questions to ask the interviewer. So let's look at some typical interview questions and then some strategies to answer them, okay? So here are the type of interview questions. First, behavioral questions. These are sort of more, I don't want to say they're basic, but they're very specific questions asking you about your behavior. How have you behaved in this kind of situation? What would you do if in this kind of situation? And it's really based on what behavior, how would you react, respond to certain situations or things that they're looking for in the job. Now, situational or case study scenarios, you see there's a little overlap here, but this would be a very specific case study. You have a customer, they come in, they're angry, they're yelling, and they want to return something, and they expect it to happen immediately. How would you approach the situation? What would you do? So they're looking for answers to specific scenarios, not necessarily generalized. When you're going through an interview, it's also important to sort of track what kinds of questions are they asking you, particularly when it's situational or case study scenario based. This is telling you a little bit about the organization too and what the job is about, right? So sometimes we have this image of what the job would be like. Maybe we're thinking that, oh, the job would be this way. And then you realize through the kind of questions that they're asking, it's a lot more customer service oriented or conflictual or maybe tedious, whatever it is. But by these kinds of situations and case studies, it gives you a lot of information about what the job is about. And one of the things I emphasize is that while they're checking you out, you're checking them out as well, right? You always need to keep that perspective that you want to be making a good decision on who your next employer is going to be. Competency or skills-based questions, right? These are really looking at, tell me about a time when you have prepared a balanced budget, or tell me about a time when you have scheduled employees for special events, or I don't know what it would be, but it's very specific skills-based, competency-based questions. I used to do a lot of recruiting in the wine industry. So one of the questions we used to ask is, what kind of wine-related software are you familiar with or have been trained on? So we were looking for very specific things that were based on a competency. We were trying to judge how much training would we have to give this person if we hired them. And that was an important factor. So if someone was new to the industry, didn't really have all the experience that we're looking for, also didn't know the software, that didn't work for us. But let's say we had someone who had years of experience in the type of position we were hiring for, and maybe they knew a different software, then we think about it differently. I had people who maybe they hadn't used the software we were looking for, but they understood how to compare it to the one that they knew, like a point of sales type of software. This is a competency or skills base. We're looking for specific types of competencies. Problem-solving questions. We're hiring you for a leadership position. You have a team of 5 people. One person comes unprepared to meetings and does not participate. What would you do, right? How do you solve that problem? Those could be problems around logistical problems. We're a caterer. You get out to a site. You're the site manager, and you realize that you didn't bring enough chairs. What would you do? How would you handle a situation like that? You are doing payroll and you realize that one of your managers has not approved the timesheets for that week. How would you solve that problem? And this is really a whole host of questions that a lot of organizations are very interested in these days. Are you a culture fit for the organization? So this is something where organizations have consciously developed a culture based around a set of core values, their purpose statement, their mission, their vision. And then they have a core group of employees who behave in a certain way that's in alignment with those values. So culture fit questions, it's hard. All of these, you should be absolutely upfront and honest. And again, listening to see what kinds of questions they're asking, because it's teaching you more about the organization. But culture fit questions are a little bit harder because either you fit or you don't fit in the organization. And they probably are not going to articulate exactly what they're looking for. These are probably going to be open-ended questions asking you about, it could be values-based. I used to ask a values question. I used to hire actually career counselors to work in a nonprofit organization. And I would ask them, what are your top 3 values that you bring to work? And I was looking for one very specific value. I needed to see that one of their top 3 values was being of service. If they didn't say that, well, I never hired anybody that didn't say that. So this was very, very important. I needed to know that every one of my staff members was truly committed to serving the community and being of service to our job seekers and our employers. If that wasn't a top value of theirs, then they were not a fit for my organization. So it's very difficult because it's not that the people who didn't say being of service was one of their top values were bad people. They're great people. It just isn't a fit here, So this is one of the things you just need to know, that you could get some culture fit questions. So the question is, how do you know that? Well, through your research. Lots of times on a website, employers will put their mission, vision. They'll talk through their recruiting process, if they're large enough to really explain what the job announcement could give you a lot of clues about the culture fit. And then you just want to make sure that you're applying to jobs where you think you'd fit in. And then during those questions, you do your best and be honest, because you don't want to work for a company where you're not a culture fit. I can tell you that right now. So those are our types of questions. So the questions can be used at different stages of the interview process. So for example, it's not uncommon to interviewers start with some culture fit questions because they don't want to get invested or really fall in love with somebody who wouldn't be a culture fit at the end, right? So I used to ask that skills question pretty much up front. Some of the scenario-based ones might be a little later in the process. Competency skill-based, probably in the beginning of the process. So know that you really should be prepared for any of these questions at any time during the process. Your screening, we talked about this in one of my other workshops, screening call, right? A telephone interview, one of the first things to kind of screen people, then your initial virtual interview. And they might have different types of questions in each of them. And as you get closer, it may be more scenario-based. So just keep that in mind, but rules about this. But they could ask any kind of question or mix of questions within the interview. What's important is just you're kind of prepared for any of them. So how do you answer them? There's a tried and true acronym, which is called STAR. And this is something that you should really remember. So if they ask you a scenario, so what would you do with a client who's yelling and screaming in the customer service line? Well, best case, you think about a situation that you've been in that is similar. You talk about the task or what you did, right? What you had to do, then the action, explain what you did, And then the result, what was the result of that? So, well, that reminds me of when I was working as a waitress and we had someone come in who got an order, the wrong takeaway order, right? What we needed to do is be able to get them first to de-escalate the situation so that the other diners could enjoy what they were doing and to fix that order as soon as possible. So I took the person off to the side. I asked them if they wanted something to drink. I was willing to bring them appetizers while they waited for us to fix their order. Then I went back and explained the situation to the chef and my manager. And the result was that at the end of the interaction, the person was very happy and they became a regular customer. So you see how you're talking about the situation, the task that needed to be done, the action that you took, and the result. Now, these are just things that I'm thinking of in terms of an example, but memorize this situation, task, action, result, and practice a few situations. Think of what kind of critical incidents or scenario-based questions might my potential new employer ask me, and then write a couple of star responses: situation, task, action, result, so that you're prepared. You begin to understand this pattern, this acronym. I will tell you, this is a tried and true method of responding to interview questions, particularly scenario-based, that kind of thing. And as an interviewer, when I saw people or could perceive that people were responding in this way, this was a great thing. I thought, wow, they have practiced, they anticipated this type of question, they're well prepared for this interview. What does that tell me as an employer? This is an employee who's going to come well prepared. This is an employee who understands best practices, right? This is an employee who can take a concept and turn it into an action, something they can do. So this is something really kind of tried and true and important. Now, this question comes up a lot, asking tricky questions. So I've come up with 4 different kinds of tricky questions. Now, I'm not going to say there couldn't be more tricky questions, but let's look at some tricky questions. So the first one, why did your last job? You know, this is a difficult, you might want to say, because my boss was no, right? Never say anything bad about your previous employer, even if you want to, even if the person was just horrible and is in jail. Don't say anything bad about your former employer, because what the interviewer is looking at is, how can I take how this person's presenting and anticipate what their behavior is going to be like on the job? So what does that mean? If you are talking bad about a former employer, they're going to think you're going to be a troublesome employee and then talk bad about you. So just don't even go there. Why did you leave last job? What you need to do is come up with some, I'm not saying to lie, you never want to lie, because there are ways to check this. You could just simply say, we parted ways, right? And kind of leave it at that. Or you could say, I left because I had family concerns, or I was looking for a new opportunity. I was looking for a new opportunity and I needed time to do that, so I left. You know, this is if you left, right? You know, if you were fired, you still have to think about it and come up with some answer that doesn't throw mud all over your previous employer. That is very, very important. Next, when to bring up salary, benefits, and vacation. So it's not really a question, but they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? Do not bring up salary, benefits, time off in the first, second interview. Reiterate this again, no matter what kind of interview you have, you save that for later on in the process. Because as a hiring manager, when I've had people on the screening call or in the very beginning, how much vacation do we get? What if I want to take time pay? that is a major red flag. I'm very unlikely to put someone forward. Now, truth is, you might want them without pay. You might want more vacation, that kind of thing. Well, wait until you've proven yourself on the job. Understand what their benefit package is. Employers put a lot of thought into their salary, benefit, vacation policies. You need to enter into that new job the same as everybody else, right? And then prove yourself on the job. Work that out kind of later. It is fair. You should know the salary. You should know the benefit package. You should know the vacation expectations well before you make a decision. But do not do it on the first, probably not the second interview, unless they're just in love with you and they're starting to talk about offering you the job, right? Because it's a red flag. So, tricky question is, do you have any more questions for me? On the first interview, say, can I take time without pay? Or how much vacation time? I 2 weeks at time. No, don't, right? This can kill the interview right there. Weaknesses and strengths. They're going to ask you, what are your 3 strengths? What are your top 3 weaknesses? Now, let me add that question. About it for sure. Think about your top 3 strengths and your top 3 weaknesses. And also think about back strengths, easy, right? But by the way, you have to be able to come up with the strengths, weaknesses, or anything in that way. If you're like a deer in the headlights, no, I don't know what my strengths are. Worse yet, I don't have any weaknesses, or I can't think of any weaknesses. Very bad. It demonstrates that you are not a self-reflective person. And that goes either way. You can't think of all these weaknesses, can't think of anything that you're strong. That shows lack of confidence, right? Not having all these strengths and no weaknesses is overconfident. You got to have both. Everybody does. So it's going to take a little bit of thought, and you might want to put it in the context of the skills that you're presenting for the job. The other thing about this, the trick to answering this question, start with your strengths. It's like much, okay? First strengths, then talk, but turn your strengths around to be, turn your weaknesses around to be what you learned and how that's a strength. Or you can start weaknesses, but always end on something positive, either end on your strengths or end on something you learned, right? So one of my weaknesses is I am very passionate about the work that I do. But this is great because I have wonderful energy with the customers, and I've learned over time how to temper that so that I use it appropriately. And it's great to be enthusiastic about what I do and demonstrate my passion. Something like that, right? So having passion for your job, employers want someone, they don't want someone bouncing off the walls. So you're saying, hey, I've learned to temper that, right? So again, on strengths and weaknesses, which you have to be prepared for. Start with your weaknesses and turn them into lessons to support your strengths. Very important way of answering those questions. And you have to have them. You don't want to show overconfidence or no confidence at all. Lack of self-reflection is not a good thing. Next one, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And other motivational questions. So what they're wanting to see is, where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, I'll tell you, you don't want to say, oh, well, in 5 years, I want to be running my own business. Then I'm going to be asking as the employer, the interviewer, then why are you applying for this job, right? You got to start to think like the interviewer. What do they want? They don't like to go through this hiring process all the time. They want to hire their next superstar, their next person that's going to be around forever. So what's the answer to this question? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself very happily employed company and supporting leadership and working towards becoming a leader in your organization myself. But be a little careful of that. So you may really be seeking promotion in a company. That opportunity is to be earned. And this goes on both sides. So as an employer, if I'm coaching someone doing the interviews, I'm always reluctant to make any kind of promises of promotion during the interview. They can talk about, say, a career ladder, like this is a typical way that people work their way up, but focus on the job. We're hiring for a receptionist right now. Could a receptionist become vice president of marketing? It's possible, but it's going to take more education and experience and opportunities that would present themselves. It's on the job. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? For the interviewer, you don't want to say, oh, I want to be running the place in 5 years, right? I want to be horseshoes. That's a real risky way of approaching it, because it seems that you're not happy in the job that they're hiring for. You're viewing to fill a need, a very specific need of the employer. And so what is important is that you focus on the immediate need. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Happily employed in your organization, have a great working relationship, opportunities for growth and contribution within the organization are wanted, and I'm ready to take them on. That's kind of the feeling of the answer you want to give. So you don't want to, again, come across as too ambitious. I'm coming in and taking over, or, well, this is just a stepping stone for bigger, better things somewhere else, my own business. So this day and age, so many people hide gigs that they hope are going to turn into the next multi-million-dollar business. You want to be careful about that. I wouldn't talk too much about side gigs, coaching businesses you have, internet apps you're writing, and no, focus on that employer, that job, and 5 years, you're going to be the best customer service rep they ever hired. 5 years from now, you could say, you as my boss are going to get an award for hiring such an amazing person like me. That's in jest, right? But something like that is much better than, oh boy, well, 5 years from now, I'm going to be doing something else. That's not the right answer. So consider, what's your motivation? Motivation for what? For the job they're hiring for. This is the greatest job that ever presented itself at the moment. Once you get into it and get the job, of course you can make it, but you're not making a commitment. Likewise, you're not making a commitment that you're going to be there for 5 years, but you want to present yourself seriously interested in that job, in that organization with growth potential, right? And I don't mean growth out of that job, I mean growth within the job, that you've learned the job very well and you're succeeding and everybody's happy with you. That's kind of the right answer. Okay, the bottom line is that employers are trying to determine if you're a good fit for the job and the culture of the organization. This is why we have interviews, regardless of whether it happens in person or whether it happens virtually. The idea is they're trying to see, is this person a good fit for us and this job? Very key. But like that, and I've said this before in other workshops, you need to remember that you're checking them out as much as they're checking you out. So do pay attention. What kind of questions are they asking? What's the tone of voice? How are they? And we'll get to this in a minute. The next topic that we're going to talk about is questions you might ask the interviewer, right? Are they happy in their job? Do they like the organization? What about the mission gets them up in the morning and excited? You're checking them out as much as they're checking you out. You don't want to get yourself into a job that you're unhappy with. So remember that. And the kinds of questions they ask, the way they ask the questions are really important. I have applied for many jobs in my life, and I remember many state organizations, county organizations, they start off with actually a very intimidating panel interview. Well, that's interesting because it does tell you something about it. They're hard jobs to get. When people get them, they don't leave. They want a lot of people involved to make sure that it's okay. And there's a strict hierarchy in organizations like that. So it's something to think about. You know, if you're having coffee with someone, and that's your interview. Once I had a job that I got, by the way, and my future boss took me out to lunch at a very nice restaurant, no wine or anything, but took me out to lunch at a very nice Italian restaurant. Well, that told me something. And he spent like 2 hours with me after we had spent 3 hours in his office or in a conference room at his office with the tour and everything. This tells you something about the tone. So pay attention to those things. So you should ask questions of the interviewer, right? But here's the thing. I've already said this. Don't start with, how many days can I have off? That's the worst thing you could do. At the end of the interview, best practice, the interviewer is going to say, do you have any questions for me? Focus on the job. You can ask those other questions later on in the process. So some good questions would be based on your research. Ask specific questions about what you would do on a daily basis. Use language like something like, when I come to work with you, what would you expect out of me in the first 3 months, the first 6 months, the first 12 months? When you're when I come to work every day as your employee, how would the day start? So you're putting yourself in that position. Use language like that. Another really good tactic is ask the interviewer about their experience. People love to talk about themselves, and they're employees of that company too, or that organization. How long have you worked here? What's your experience? What's the thing that really motivates you and gets you excited about the mission, vision, and values, right? These are good questions because people love to talk about themselves. You'll see that interviewer light up. Be sure though, sometimes organizations hire recruiting firms, but be sure you know who you're talking to. You don't want to ask a question like, oh, how long have you worked for the company, when they actually work for a recruiting firm, right? So be sure you know who you're talking to. Ask them what the best part of their job is. What's the worst part of their job? That's a fair question, and they have choice in how they answer that. You can ask them what makes them proud to work there. There are a lot of good things about that tactic of asking questions. Again, people like to talk about themselves, but you are showing a real interest in understanding more about the culture and what it's going to be like. And that's great. That's really good. So another important thing is following up and being patient. So you do want to send a follow-up note, but you're going to be patient about that, especially in a time where there's widespread unemployment, where employers may be bombarded with resumes, inquiries. You just need to be patient, but do follow up. Send an email afterwards. It gives you a great opportunity to tell them more about how you're the perfect fit for that job. So preparation is key. Let's go over it a little bit. You want to practice answering mock interview questions. You want to test the technology platform used for the interview the day before so that you have time to work out any issues. And this is really important. Let's say you try to log on and you cannot do it. Then I would send an email or make a phone call prior to the event to say, hey, I don't think I have the right link, or be careful not asking for too much direction on how to do it, but just check in. I just want to make sure I have the right login information, right? Test your microphone, your speakers, the lighting. You want to schedule time to be private. Find a quiet and distraction-free location. You want to choose a neutral background or use a virtual background. You want to plan how you want to look on camera. Wear professional clothes, wear makeup if you're a woman, or whatever is indicative of how you're going to show up professionally. Some people don't like to wear makeup, that's fine, but you do want to make sure that you look professional for your industry online. And think of some questions to ask the interview. So your follow-up should include an email thanking the interviewer or interviewers, plural, and summarizing what you discussed. So this gives you an opportunity to add additional information that you think you need to know about. There was a woman who applied for a job as a career counselor, and I have never seen anyone write the more beautiful follow-up letters. She kind of reiterated, summarized what the interview was all about. She highlighted the things that we were most interested in, and then she provided additional information, kind of add-ons to her resume, clarifying the things that she had done that we were looking for. It was impeccable and it was beautiful. Of course, we hired her. But this is the kind of thing, you know, we talked about writing a resume. It shouldn't be more than 2 pages unless you're going after a job in academia or medicine or applying to jobs in Europe. They should really be very brief. And in that case, it's just to get your foot in the door to the opportunity to interview. After the interview, you can send more information. During an interview, one of the things that you can also think about is providing a portfolio, and not just for art, but I know I've gone after teaching positions, for example, and I've prepared handouts for the interviewers with samples of my work. Now, we couldn't do that in a virtual environment, but I could certainly send them information prior, right? Or send them information following. Following is nice because you then, especially after the first interview, you have an idea what they're looking for. So follow up to say thank you, but also to provide additional information. And you want to make this timely. I would say no more than 48 hours, right? So best immediately afterwards, send a follow-up, okay? So let's look at our actual interview summary. First, you want to confirm that you have the correct login information and that you have all the technology, both hardware and software, to fully participate. You want to make a good virtual first impression. Consider what you'll wear, your virtual background, lighting, and most importantly, log on about 5 minutes early. Do your research. There's no excuse these days because information is literally in the palm of your hand, in your phone. Prepare for a variety of questions and practice them with a trusted friend. You want to think of any questions you could ask that you consider tricky. Prepare an answer that maintains your professional integrity and that doesn't say anything negative about your previous employer. Prepare questions for the interviewer. Focus on the job, not the schedule, the pay, the benefits, until you're getting closer to an offer. And send that follow-up message right away within 48 hours, thanking them and telling them why you are perfect for the job, right? You don't know the sequence with which you're going to fall. You might be the first person they interview and you might be perfect for the job, but as they move through, they might get more excited about some other candidates. So if you send a well-timed thank you note, can remind the interviewer, oh yeah, Kathy, oh, we got to put her back in the mix, okay? So this is really important. So with all of my workshops, I offer a challenge activity. Here's your challenge activity. Everybody this day and age should have a free Zoom account. It doesn't cost you anything to do it, and then you're already prepared. You can open up a Zoom meeting by yourself or with a friend and practice. And Zoom has become sort of the state of the art, right? It's very user-friendly. It's seamless to use. This is the platform we're on. There are many different platforms, but even very complicated platforms like Adobe Connect are trying to make things easy like it is for Zoom. There's GoToWebinar and a whole bunch of things. But if you know how to use Zoom it's very likely that you're going to be able to use any of the platforms that any organization could throw at you. So create a Zoom account and start using it. Zoom your parents, Zoom your friends, Zoom whoever. Just start to get very comfortable on the platform and practice. So experiment with Zoom backgrounds, finding your best online look. So you can see I have the Santa Barbara courthouse because I love the Santa Barbara courthouse. Now, it's not that my virtual background is terrible, but it's just a wall. So I like to have something, particularly when I'm working for the Santa Barbara Workforce Development Board, that's indicative of the area that we're in. But for different meetings, I do different things. So think about having a virtual background. Have fun figuring that out. They're very easy to upload on Zoom, and you can do a Google search on how to do that. But it is important what your background looks like. Find a buddy to practice using Zoom and virtual interviews using the typical interview question that we kind of talked about. Now, I have a handout related to this that has some links to some articles that list a lot of these behavioral questions, case scenario questions, culture fit questions, that kind of thing, so that you can actually begin to practice with your buddy on Zoom from these kind of questions so that you feel comfortable. The worst thing is that this virtual interview is the first time that you're doing this kind of thing. So that's very important that you practice. So with that, what I'd like to do is ask any questions. And I know you're all muted, but I would welcome you to unmute or to put questions into the chat. And I'm happy to answer the questions for you. Are there any questions? Okay, here's a question from Vicky. How does one get that handout you mentioned? Oh, that's a good question. So after the workshop, we've recorded this. The recording is going to be posted on the YouTube channel for the Santa Barbara County Workforce Development Board and America's Job Center of California. So here's what you want to look at. Find their YouTube channel, and there you'll have a link to the handouts. Good question, Vicki. Any other questions? You can unmute and ask them. There we go. Thank you. The YouTube channel link has been put into the chat. Make sure everybody has their chat up. And I'll send it again. The handout can be found as well as a recording of this and all the virtual workshops they've done for Santa Barbara County, America's Job Center of California. Okay, any other questions? Please subscribe to the channel and reach out to your America's Job Center of California. They're here to help you find a job. The Employment Development Department is also available not only for your unemployment claims, but other resources to help job seekers, as well as the Department of Social Services. And you can always call 911 to get referrals. This is a challenging time. My heart is with you if you're looking for a job at this time. And what my hope is that you're able to really feel comfortable on a virtual platform, understand how the process of the interview is going to go, and how you can succeed at landing that next great job. I don't think there are any other questions. It's been my pleasure. Again, my name is Kathy Markov, and you can see us on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Please wear your mask and be safe. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting.